Hey everyone, my name is Sophie from Sophisticated Organization. Thanks for joining me in my pantry today so that we can talk a little bit more about decanting and specifically pantry decanting. So if you're not familiar with what decanting is, typically the term is used just to mean pouring the contents of one container into another. Oftentimes we hear about decanting wine, but you can really decant products all throughout your entire house. And if you've followed me here on YouTube or on Instagram, you know that I love an aesthetically pleasing, organized space. Oftentimes that involves some decanting of some sort all throughout my house, but one of the main places that I love to implement some decanting is here in the pantry, as I'm sure you can tell. I have all of my uniform containers behind me, and I wanted to go over not only what I think the benefits are, maybe some of the downsides to decanting, as well as some frequently asked questions and some tips and tricks on what you can do if you are decanting in your pantry. So let's start off right away with some of the benefits of decanting. I already mentioned the first benefit, and that is that it's aesthetically pleasing. I feel all sorts of joy when I walk into this pantry and see how nice and organized everything is, and the look of all of those uniform containers really just makes my organizing heart sing. That is obviously one really big benefit, is that it has a neat look to it. But there are tons of other ones, including the fact that if you have an airtight container, it's going to prolong the life of your food. So you don't have to necessarily use the exact containers that I have here. I like the xoxo pop containers. They just pop right open like this and come open and pop closed, and they seal that way. So something like this is really great because it is airtight. You're going to kind of defeat the purpose or not get the full value of the benefit of decanting if you don't have an airtight container. So having airtight containers oftentimes will give you a longer shelf life of your product than just rolling up the plastic inside of a bag and using a little chip clip to seal it, or even just rolling it over in general, or whatever the product is. These airtight containers are going to help a whole lot. Another great thing is that if you pick out a few sizes here, or if you have containers that are all the same size throughout your pantry, you're gonna find that you can actually fit more in your space. So you'll see I have some that are stacked on top of each other, like the two over here. I have two different layers, but the fact that they're uniform containers makes it a lot easier to stack one thing on top of another and make it so you can fit more items in one space. The boxes that all of these things came in, or bags, are all different sizes. It's really hard to squish them all in, so having the uniform containers actually allows you to fit more in your pantry than you may have been able to previously. Another one of my favorite things is the fact that I can easily see exactly what I have, and that has two benefits in my mind. Number one is that you're going to be able to make healthy choices. You know exactly what's in your pantry, so you're less tempted to maybe go pick out something that's not as healthy because all of your items are here. It's going to help with meal planning and things like that. But the second thing is that it's also going to save you money. So I know buying all of these containers can be expensive, but I do think there is a little bit of it that can save you money in the long run by seeing the food that's right in front of you. When you go to the grocery store, you're going to know what you have on hand already. So you're going to prevent yourself from going to the grocery store and thinking that you have something and then going home and realizing and opening the box that you only have a tablespoon left of breadcrumbs instead of what you thought was 2 cups worth of breadcrumbs. It will help you purchase the items you actually need and not purchase things that you already have sitting in your pantry right in front of your very eyes. Now I think we should talk about some of the downsides and drawbacks of decanting, because I want to acknowledge that there are some negatives to decanting. One of the main downsides that I hear from a lot of people, and I fully agree with, is decanting and coming up with a pantry like the one that I have here can be expensive. You can find containers that are on the more affordable side for sure. These OXO pop containers are ones that last forever. I grew up using these. My mom has had hers for I don't even know how many years, so they are very high quality, and there are some that are less expensive. Again, you just want to make sure that if you are using them that are less expensive, they are still airtight. So it doesn't have to be the most expensive, but you still want to make sure it's high quality, even if it's on the more affordable end. But even with affordable containers, this isn't free. It costs money. So downside is that it's expensive. Another negative is that it can actually be quite messy to decant. So you're pouring all of your containers that you get from the grocery store, your boxes and other things like that, into these large bins. Sometimes you'll see below I have my spices. So you're pouring them into smaller containers that maybe have a very small opening, and that sometimes leads to spills. But I will say, I know we're talking about the negatives here. I will say, think about flour specifically. So every time I go to bake something with a bag of flour and scoop my measuring cup in there, I feel like flour is always going everywhere. When I roll the top down, it tends to kind of like have fallout on the sides, and I have flour all over my countertop. It's on the side of the bag. Then I put it in my pantry gets messy. So I would rather make that mess one time as I pour the whole bag of flour into my large flour bin, rather than make a mess every single time I go to bake or use that flour. So kind of a pro, kind of a con. I'll let you guys decide. But beyond the fact that it is messy and expensive, it's also time consuming. So when you come home from the grocery store, if you are somebody who's made the decision to decant, it's gonna take you a moment. You can't just throw all of your groceries in the pantry, in your cabinet or cupboard like you used to. If you're going to replace some items that were completely out, then it might take a moment for you to actually put all of those groceries away, because you're gonna have to do a little bit of decanting. Okay, so let's run through some of the most frequently asked questions that I get when it comes to decanting. Number one is, what type of containers should I purchase? I don't know where to start. We talked about the importance of having uniform containers. You saw that I have some that are different sizes, but I try and limit the number of sizes so that they do stack on top of each other pretty nicely and make a uniform pattern within my pantries. Also, you're gonna wanna be conscious of the size of the containers that you're getting for each item that you plan to decant. So by that, I mean, I am not going to use something that is this small for my bag of flour. That would make absolutely no sense to me, because you would be pouring your 5-pound bag of flour into a tiny, tiny container, and then you have all of this excess left over in the bag of flour. So you want to be able to, in my mind, pour the full container of whatever you're purchasing at the grocery store into your canister. The only exception to that is when you buy in bulk. So if you buy a bag of flour at Costco, you don't need to have a giant canister to fit that entire bag. Part of the benefit of decanting is the fact that you can buy in bulk and not have to have those bulky items on your pantry shelves or in your cabinet or anything like that. You can put them in a place that's a little bit more tucked away. But in general, you want to be able to pour your entire regular grocery size container into the size of the container that you've purchased. Next is, what do I do with all of the excess that doesn't fit into the containers that I buy? So if you are somebody that's taking advantage of decanting because you do prefer to purchase in bulk, or you just sometimes have something that the container doesn't fit the full item and you have a little bit of excess left in the bag or the container, I suggest having one bin or one location where you have all of that back stock or all of that excess. I like to have that on the floor of my pantry and can refill things easily that way. You can have it tucked away elsewhere, but I try and limit it to just that one space, and it's all of my back stock and all of those little leftover things. It kind of defeats the purpose if you have much more than that. So try to keep it as limited as possible. What about labeling things? I like to suggest that you make your labels as general and as broad as possible. So an example that I have here is my nuts container. I know what type of nuts these are. I know that I switch out nuts sometimes regularly, sometimes frequently. So for me, it makes more sense to have a general title here rather than one that's super specific. I do the same thing with my pasta containers. I just label them pasta. That way, if I get rigatoni one day and elbow noodles the next day, I don't have to relabel it or suffer through the organizing nightmare of having it say rigatoni and I have elbow noodles inside of there. It can just say pasta. I visually know what type of pasta that is. So that's enough for me, but keeping them as general as possible makes it so you don't have to switch out your labels super often, especially if you're going with a more professional looking label like these ones that you're going to want to make high quality and stick on there, and they're going to stay for a while. So these labels I do actually sell on my website if you're ever interested in purchasing custom labels. But another great thing is that you can just use a marker and write on your containers by hand. You can use a Sharpie paint pen. That's a great thing to do, and it comes off perfectly with a magic eraser. You could just use a regular Sharpie and write on them if you want. You can do little sticker labels yourself. Really get creative if you are interested in labeling your containers. What about expiration dates and instructions, nutritional information, all of that stuff? For expiration dates, you can do exactly what I just mentioned about labeling. Is you can use a Sharpie paint pen and use a little magic eraser to just write on the bottom when the expiration date is every time you pour an item in there, and just erase it when you're done. I actually just sometimes use a regular thin Sharpie and it comes off just fine if I kind of scratch at it or use a little bit of acetone on the bottom or something. The bigger question that I get more often is, what do I do with instructions and what do I do with nutritional information that I want to save that's important to me? I like to use these little pockets on the side. I don't need them for very many things, but there are a couple of items like this couscous that I constantly forget how to make it. I know it's so basic, but I still forget. So cutting out the instructions there and just slipping them into this little adhesive pocket works great for me. And you can, again, do that with either instructions or with the nutritional information. Another thing I've seen some people do before, and a few of you have actually shared that you do this as well, is to take the top off and put those instructions right in the top there with a little piece of tape. So that is another easy way to do it and a lot less expensive too. What types of things should and can I decant? I decant both dried goods and some liquids like my oils and my vinegars. So it doesn't just have to be for your dried pantry goods. That's usually what people think about, but you can easily do both. I definitely don't recommend decanting absolutely everything that you purchase from the grocery store. Like I mentioned, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. I would recommend decanting a few things. As you can tell, I'm a proponent of it. I think if there's one item from the grocery store that I would recommend that you decant, it's probably the flour. And that's for the exact reason that I mentioned earlier. Flour is so messy, and just decanting the flour makes such a difference when I'm baking and making things a little bit cleaner for me, because I am already a messy cook as it is, and I don't need even more of a mess. So what types of things should you decant beyond liquid versus dried goods? They should be the items that you're using on a regular and frequent basis. If it's an item that you're buying just kind of as a one-off, you don't need to purchase a whole separate container to pour that item in just for that one random recipe that you're making. That makes absolutely no sense. They should be your most used products, the things that you like to have in stock in your pantry, and other items like that. So there is a very fine balance here to somewhere in the middle ground of decanting absolutely everything and decanting nothing. And I have full faith in you that you will find that happy medium. Doesn't the food at the bottom get really old and then you always have fresh food at the top? So people will ask what you do about refilling the containers if you are running low on your oats. And oats are something that you decide to decant. And you go to the grocery store, you go get some more oats because you know you're running low because it's a clear container and you can easily see that you're running low. And you get home and you have that little bit left. What do? So there's two strategies to this. Number one, I try and work through my products regularly so I know they're not expiring. I can always check the bottom or check where I've written the expiration date. But beyond taking the full time to work through the entire item, sometimes I will take the easy route and pour the oats into like a small bowl or something, take my new container of oats that I just bought from the grocery store, dump that in, and then dump the old ones on top of it. That does make it a little bit trickier in terms of expiration dates and in terms of the fact that your oats might kind of blend together and it all becomes one really, and you can't really tell the difference between the old oats and the new oats. That's more the strategy I use for something that I'm using pretty frequently and I'm just going to use it up pretty quickly anyway. I'm probably not going to hit either of the expiration dates or get anywhere close to it. If it's something I'm using less often, then I do try and work all the way through it before pouring in the next batch of whatever I've purchased. And I will say, if something is an item that I use extremely frequently and really won't get anywhere near that expiration date, maybe it's something that doesn't expire very quickly, I will just throw it on top of the food that's already in there, and it really doesn't matter to me. So you can pick how important that is to you and which of the three strategies you want to use. The super lazy one, just throw things on top. That's best if you're going to work through it quickly. Or again, you can wait till it's all the way gone or dump everything out, pour the new item in, and dump the old stuff on top. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you learned a little bit more about decanting. Maybe I answered some of your questions that you've had in the back of your mind as you've been watching some of my videos and seen my pantry or seen me decant something in the past. If you still have more questions, make sure to leave a comment below. I will do my best to get back to you and get back to you in a timely fashion and answer all of those additional questions. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate if you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I post a new video, and until next time, I will see you guys later.